On January 10th, 1981, inside a quiet home in St. Augustine, Florida, Richard Boone took his final breath. He was 63 years old. The voice that once commanded television screens throughout America had been reduced to an aching whisper, suppressed by an illness that struck with deadly irony. For years, fans believed they knew him as the ultimate figure of power, strength, and intellect. But long after the camera stopped recording, his kid would uncover the reality that had been concealed under Boone's threatening glare. And it was considerably more painful than anyone thought. Richard Allen Boone was born on June 18, 1917, in Los Angeles, California, with a name rich with legacy. He was the grandson of famed frontiersman Daniel Boone, a heritage that seemed almost prophetic for the gruff authority he would one day portray on television. Yet his early existence was not touched by abrupt fate. Boone was analytical, thoughtful, and profoundly drawn to ideas, literature, and meaning. Long before Hollywood discovered him, he was quietly developing an inner cosmology that would later define his performances. At Stanford University, Boone studied acting and immersed himself in philosophy and the arts. He wasn't after stardom, he was craving for comprehension. That search took an unexpected and fatal turn during World War II, when Boone served as a navigator in the U.S. Navy, flying lethal combat sorties over the Pacific. The fight produced scars that never fully healed. It gave him a weariness, a realism, and a moral gravity that no acting class could teach. He didn't play hardened men. He understood them. After the war, Boone returned to acting with a passion that set him unique. He trained with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, adopting a disciplined, emotionally grounded technique. Early jobs presented him as criminals, soldiers, and authoritative figures, men whose power came with implications. Standing over 6 feet tall with a loud baritone voice, Boone was unforgettable even when he wasn't the main. And then, in 1957, everything changed. When Boone was cast as Paladin in Have Gun, Will Travel, television westerns were altered overnight. Paladin was no average gunman. He was educated, cerebral, and ethically sophisticated. A man who cited Shakespeare, dressed black, and operated by a rigorous personal code. Boone insisted on new narratives and ethical themes, often clashing with executives who underestimated the audience. The result was one of the most respected westerns of its day. Boone had arrived at the top of his talents. But beyond the spotlight, the truth was more awful. As celebrity increased, so did the yearning to stay invincible. Boone's performances were praised, but off-screen he became increasingly reclusive. Friends and colleagues witnessed a man carrying hidden weight. He married 3 times, finding true stability only with his third wife, Claire McAloon, whom he married in 1951. Together, they developed a tranquil family life and welcomed a son, Peter Boone, who even featured alongside his father on Have Gun, Will Travel. To the public, Boone was in control. Privately, he was facing challenges no one could see. Through the 1960s and 1970s, Boone continued to provide amazing performances in films like The Tall T, The Kremlin Letter, and Big Jake alongside John Wayne. He returned to television with Heck Ramsey, once again redefining a genre part with wisdom and maturity. Even when fashions moved, Boone adapted, giving his weight to anything from spaghetti westerns to fantasy pictures. In 1977, his deep, terrifying voice brought life to Smaug in The Hobbit, a performance that would become iconic. But his body was beginning to fail him. By the mid-1970s, Boone was fighting a horrible sickness that he kept nearly entirely secret. Throat cancer steadily took his strength, turning speech into anguish for a man whose voice had been his greatest asset. According to his kid, this bodily misery was aggravated by years of excessive smoking and alcohol usage. These activities were neither hearsay or exaggerations. They were things Boone himself acknowledged in moments of searing honesty. In one sad confession, Boone exposed his drinking to his son without explanation or hubris. "I drank until my throat burned, and it made me unable to drink anymore," he remarked, demonstrating not toughness but desperation. He publicly confessed he knew it was harming him, yet was helpless to quit. Despite the love and intervention of his family, Boone remained locked in a cycle of misery, addiction, and worsening health. But no one knew what was coming next. As his circumstances worsened, Boone made a silent choice. He backed away from Hollywood and returned to Florida, choosing tranquility above attention. In his final months, people close to him remembered a guy who was physically weaker but cognitively alert, contemplative, and well aware that his time was ending. The walls he had created over a lifetime of discipline and solitude eventually melted. He spoke honestly about remorse, about endurance, and about the difficulty of enduring pain alone. It seemed like the end, and in many ways it was. But there was also closure. When Richard Boone passed away in 1981, headlines lauded his career, his extraordinary performances, and his contribution to American television. What they didn't catch was the quiet tragedy corroborated years later by his son. Boone wasn't hiding scandal. He was masking suffering. His private life was not marked by secrets meant to deceive, but by anguish suffered at an age when men were urged to remain silent at all costs. Today, with his son's confirmation, Richard Boone's story feels more personal than ever. He was a man of enormous talent and character, but also weakness and hardship. His legacy is not tarnished by the facts, it is deepened by it. He didn't only represent complex men on television, he lived like one. Richard Boone didn't simply leave behind performances. He left behind a reminder that strength and hardship often walk hand in hand. And in completely comprehending the man behind the mythology, we realize that he didn't only live a magnificent life, he became the story itself. What element of his trip stayed with you the longest?